the Rashad Show, Kenny Lopez.
Appreciate you having me on, Rashad. It's not often do I get a lot of interviews, so or people asking me for interviews about my football career. So looking forward to it.
All right, man. First and foremost, man, where were you born? Where you originally from?
I was born and raised in Key West, Florida, which is about 90 miles from Cuba and about 2.5 hours from Coral Gables, so not too far from home.
Okay, growing up, like, who were your role models? Like, who were the influential people that influenced you to do what you do?
I'll tell you what, I grew up with my grandmother and my granddad. I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. So really, man, I looked up to my older brothers growing up. That's really what it was. They all played football, and I sort of followed in line.
Okay, other than playing football, were there any other sports that you participated in other than football?
I'll tell you what, honestly, I was in Key West probably until about the 3rd grade, and then I relocated to New York. And when I was in New York, we played a lot of basketball. And I came back to Key West in the 8th grade. And during that time, they had like 8 weight limits. So if you were above a certain weight, you couldn't play football. So I played basketball, all the way until the 11th grade. And I didn't play football until my 11th grade year in high school.
Okay, other than the University of Miami, were there any other schools that was reaching out to you to, with a scholarship to play football for their program other than Miami?
I'll tell you what, man, I had opportunities from every school. I took all 5 of my visits. I went to Florida State for a recruiting visit, went to the University of Florida. I went to, of course, Miami, and decided to go far. I went to West Virginia and Minnesota. And
sorry about that.
Quick thing about Minnesota. I'm from Key West, and the biggest jacket I had was like a high school letterman jacket. So when I got off the plane, I'm walking through the airport, and I'm like, man, well, it's kind of cold out here. And so I'm walking with the recruiter, and they open the door to go out to the car, and it was windy. And I said, man, it's too cold out there. I'm not going. It was 15 below zero. And so they took me to a place on campus, and they got me a jacket. They got me some gloves, a hat, scarf, earmuffs. I went back to my hotel. I turned the heater on 90. And, I enjoyed the trip, but I knew right then I wouldn't come to Minnesota, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so who actually recruited you? Was it Dennis Erickson or somebody else other than the coach?
I was the last class with Jimmy Johnson before Dennis Erickson came on board. Okay. So, actually, the offensive coordinator, I forgot his name now, from the Jimmy Johnson staff recruited me. And he came into my living room, and he had on all the national championship rings, and he was flashing that in front of my aunt and uncle, and that's who I was living with at the time. And he said, you want to get one of these? And he was like dangling in front of me. And so, I ended up going to Miami, and the reason was because, I was a defensive lineman, and back then they had a tradition for defensive linemen. Also, I was pretty serious about academics, so it was a private university. And plus, being from Key West, my family didn't have to travel very far to come up there to see my high school coach, to keep everyone engaged. So that's why I decided to go to Miami.
Was it Gary Stevens?
Yeah, it was Gary Stevens. Absolutely. Gary Stevens. I forgot it. Yeah.
Okay, so when was your first year at Miami? When you came to Miami, what was the first year?
I came in at
89. 89, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did you redshirt?
Yes. Yeah, back then, guys redshirted, and they sort of knew that, in most cases, you weren't probably going to play until, your 2nd or 3rd year. Nowadays, these guys are like, if they can't come in and play right now, then, they're not going to wait or anything. And
okay, so
people used to tell me on recruiting visits, kids on recruiting visits used to say, well, why are you going to Miami, man? They got All-Americans sitting the bench. Why are you going there? My thought process was that, I was willing to sit the bench behind somebody that was better than me, and I would just work and get
Okay, so the '89 team that was that was your first year, so you was red shirt, so you won national championship. Talk about that feeling because you beat Alabama 33-25. So talk about that experience, even though you didn't play that much, correct me if I'm wrong, but talk about that experience being on the national champion team your first year as a red shirt.
I tell you what, man, just going to the practices was a war. I was a true freshman, and so they would always put the young guys up against the first team offensive line, and I remember what we call middle drill. It's like the first team offensive line, the quarterback, and the two running backs against the defensive line and the linebacker. And the first practice, was like a war. And, these guys up here, they're in your face, they're ready to fight you. And I guess it was sort of like a weeding out process to see who was scared, who was going to be man enough to stick in there and play ball. But it was definitely a war every day in practice. But really learn to love your players and your team, and just to see the fight that the guys had week in and week out was just unbelievable. So
Okay, so you win the national championship in '89, so '90, that's when you start get like fan time. In 1990, your next year.
right. My next year, my sophomore year, I started to get some run, a little bit of run, get into games a little bit, and blowouts and stuff like that. You know, and I remember that it was in a bowl game, and we were playing the University of Texas, and we were just blowing them out in the bowl games. It was so bad that they put the younger guys in, and in that game, I actually got my first sack. And if you look at the first 30 for 30, you'll see,
Yeah.
when they show that game that I actually got a sack in the game. And so, that gave us a lot of confidence going into the next year where we're going to get real substantial playing time. And so that was awesome, man. Just being able to get out there and play, and a bit scary at first, but once you settled in, it was a lot of fun, man. And all the older guys on the side pumping you up, watching you play and hyping you up and going there and make big plays, and everybody wanted to make a big play. You see it on television. That was a big thing right there. And back then there was a lot of dancing and having fun. And so we enjoyed it as young kids.
Okay, so the '91 team, that team was definitely a great team. Coming off, uncharacteristically losing two games, you lost to BYU, Notre Dame. So '91, I want to talk about certain games from that season, if you have good memories of it. The Houston game, because that was against David Klingler, that had that high flying offense 2 years before that. Andre Ware won the Heisman. Talk about going into that game as you guys won 40-10 on national television on ESPN. It was on Thursday night. Talk about that game.
It's amazing because all going into that game, they were talking about how good the Houston offense was and how many points they were going to put up against us, and that their receivers were going to be one-on-one with our linebackers. But what they didn't know is that, we had, at linebacker, we had Jesse Armstead, who was the number one recruit in the nation. Back then, he wasn't very big. I think he was like 200 pounds. But, in training camp, I saw him run a legit 4.4. We had Darren Smith at the other linebacker position. He ran a 4.4. And in the middle, we had Michael Barrow, who ran like a 4.6. So we had our linebackers going one-on-one against their receivers in a three-receiver set. And I wasn't a starter, but I got in quickly. And I made a lot of plays in that game. I got a sack on David Klingler in that game. That's also the game that I got injured in. One of their linemen, I was chasing after the quarterback to the sideline, and he threw the ball away, and I let up off of him, and a lineman came full speed and just dove right into my knee with his helmet. And they actually carted me off the field, and I was done the rest of that season. But we had a great season that year, and we went to the championship game.
Yeah, you won 40-10. You had 5 sacks on the defensive side. And that thing about that game too is that the Hurricanes had won the 39th game in a row at home that tied Notre Dame for the second longest winning streak at that time. Gino Torre threw 4 touchdowns. That this amazing performance. The other game I want to talk about during that season was the Penn State game. That was an interesting game. Schools had not met since the '87 Fiesta Bowl, and was that like payback going into that game? Obviously, you've been playing that game. That was a few years before you came, because that was the national championship game at that time. The fatigue game and all that. But you played them since the first time since that game. You win that game, a close game, very tight game, 26-20. Talk about that game.
I tell you what, actually, I think, I came in 89, 90. I remember that Penn State game because we played them in Penn State. And I actually got a sack in that game. So I think it's the wrong, the year before that is when I got, see, I'm trying to remember what year I got hurt. Was it the year after that? I think, no, it was the year before that I got hurt. So in that game, I remember that game vividly because everybody was talking about the fatigues and it was our first time up there. But the thing I remember about Penn State was just taking a ride to the stadium. I mean, dude, that place looked like it was set back in the 30s. I mean, it was just like whoa, like we had gone back in time. And to bring our team up there with large portion African American with Cubans and stuff like that. I mean, all kind of racial slurs they were telling us. And at that time, we played three top 10 teams back to back to back. And everybody was saying that was like the equivalent of like an NFL schedule. And so we played them, and it was a tough game, and I got a sack, and I remember what broke the game open for us was Darren Klein, one of my defensive end, one of my teammates, got like a screen pass interception and ran it back for a touchdown. And that was, I tell you what, that was a great, great win for us. It was unbelievable. But when you're playing in those games and you don't really recognize how big it is in history, you're just trying to win a game. You know what I mean? And try to make plays out there, and not lose. But it was a great to see Joe Paterno out there and to see the guys that you came in finally started to make plays. I know Paul White, who was my roommate, he got an interception in that game. Dexter Siegler played. I mean, we had a lot of Darrell Williams. These are all guys that I came in with, so it was a great year for us. It was a great year for sure.
No, that was 1992. The one I was talking about, the '91. He played Penn State 2 years back to back. That's the one part you did. The '91 game. I was talking about that. The one in the Orange Bowl. Y'all won 26-2.
Okay.
Yeah, I was referring to that.
Oh, okay. Man, I tell you what, honestly, man, I was going through, the knee surgery and stuff like that, man. I was honestly, I was there, but I wasn't traveling and stuff like that. I watched it on television, but that was a great game as well. But we definitely wanted to show up against them for sure once they put us back on the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so game of the year in '91 obviously was the wide right against Florida State. Arch rivals. Talk about, even though you still recuperating from the injury. Let's talk about that game as Miami won 17-16 to go to number one, beating Florida State.
I mean, anytime you play Florida State at Miami, it's always a bloodbath. Corey Sawyer, who I played with in high school in Key West, was All-American corner for Florida State. So, coming from a small town where I'm from, the whole city, they take sides. Who's going with Miami? Who's going with Florida State? I mean, and it was bad blood because we were ranked high and so were they. And back then, typically that game always decided the national championship, But there's one team we did not want to lose to, that was Florida State. And that was a great, great win for us, man. And we partied like it was 1999 after winning that game. Charlie Ward was unbelievable, as he always was. But yeah, that was a great victory for us, and we just love to stick it to Florida State, man.
Yeah, I think the quarterback was in that game was Casey Weldon.
Was he the quarterback in that one?
Yeah, Casey Weldon.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I'm talking about must have been the following year.
Yeah, the following year. Yeah. Okay, so
but he was scary, man. Watch film with Casey Weldon. All their quarterbacks were great quarterbacks, and he ran an unbelievable offense, and
championship game, you beat Nebraska 22-0. That was another championship. Cementing yourselves as a dynasty, winning 4 championships in like a 8-year span. It's all about leading up to that game, beating Nebraska and shutting them out because it's rare for Nebraska at that time be shut out in the Orange Bowl, especially you beat them 22-0. Talk about that game as you won the national championship in '91.
Well, what I remember most about that is, back then Nebraska ran the ball crazy. So it was, more so, could we hold up and stop that run game? And when we came out and we scored first, I think Kevin Williams scored a touchdown pass. We were rolling from there. We were rolling on all cylinders, and our defense was hype. We was shutting down that run game, and man, we just cruised, man. We just took it. Nebraska was always a tough foe, historically, when we played them in the past, and we won that championship, and it was an unbelievable feeling, that's for sure.
Okay, you won 22-0. That was a shutout. And like I said, it was rare for a Nebraska program led by Tom Osborne to be shut out 22-0. So now 92. So was that your junior year? 92.
That was my red shirt sophomore year.
Okay, 92. Okay, so that was an interesting offseason because you had dealt with, the Hurricane Andrew situation, and then you had to play Iowa. Talk about being ready for Iowa despite all the stuff that was going on with the Hurricane Andrew and meeting Iowa and beating Iowa in your first game. Talk about that game for 92.
The interesting thing with that is that we had to move our home. I remember being in our dorms and them coming telling us that if when the storm came, that we would have to sleep in our hallways. And I remember being in the dorms when that thing came, and we lived in old army barracks, so they were, they were concrete, they were solid. And that thing came and it shook the whole foundation of the building. And when we came out the next day, trees were laid flat, and which was crazy to see a destroyed homestead further south down in South Florida. So what they decided to do was take the whole team and go to Vero Beach and practice at Vero Beach, which is what we did. And basically they took us away from everything to focus. So it wasn't running the streets, it wasn't going to see family or anything like that. It took us like 2.5, 3 hours away and put us in like this compound. And man, we just practiced like madmen, and that was all that we focused on. So Iowa was in trouble because there was no distraction from any of the players for at least a couple of weeks to focus on that one game, And that was a great game for us as well, I don't remember what the rankings were. Do you have what the rankings were coming into that game?
I think y'all was top ranked. Y'all was number 1, preseason number 1.
What was Iowa? 16 or something?
I think they, according to the USA Today poll, they were 15.
Okay, yeah, 15th or 16th. Yeah, I know they were up there. But we played them in Iowa, and I just remember it was a night game, and that was my first year back off the injury, and I think I had like 5 tackles in the first half. I had a great game in that game. And man, once we shut down their run, it was over for them. They didn't do anything else, man. We defensively up front, we just kicked their butts, So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the final score in that game was 24-7. That was the first game of the season to open up the season. The other game I want to talk about obviously is Florida State again. Wide Right Part 2. This time in the Orange Bowl, 92. Talk about that game as you guys won 19-16.
Well, I think that was a high noon game, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why, you're talking about the middle, how hot it was. I mean, it was brutal, man. But once again, by this time, they had played a couple of games, and everybody was talking about Charlie Ward. That was the first, run and shoot offense where they put 3 to 4 wide receivers out there and just threw the ball around everywhere. And Charlie jelly, man. He was slippery. He was quick. I mean, he had almost like he had eyes behind his head. He had a third awareness where he could just feel the rush. But I actually got a game ball for that game. I had like 2 sacks in that game. Um, and I remember just chasing him around and just being so exhausted after that game. We gave so much, and we barely pulled it out, you know. And I remember after the game, you know, because a lot of the guys knew each other, they would stay and like shake hands and talk to each other. Guys who went to the same high school and guys who remembered each other from high school. And I tried to find Corey Sawyer after the game. And man, I tell you what, after the game, he just ran into the locker room. He didn't even want to talk to me, you know. But yeah, we that was a great game, man.
But you already talked about the following week, because the following week you played Penn State. You already talked about Darren Crime making that interception. I'm gonna skip that game. You won 17 to 14 in that matchup. Yeah, 17-14. Other game I want to talk about from '92 was Syracuse, going up to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. That was a very tough game. You won. You pulled that out. Talk about that game in Syracuse.
You know, man, every time we played Syracuse, it was tough. I mean, they weren't ranked high all the time back then, but it was always a tough game. They had a tough offensive line, man. They weren't very big, but they were quick. You know, short and quick and pretty strong. And I remember, I don't know, you know, honestly, man, for us, we got them for the big games. You know, games like Syracuse were just like, you know, games that we just had to play in order to get to the big game. So obviously, in a lot of cases, it was a letdown, especially when you come off of, you know, playing. Because I think there were three top teams we had to play. I think it was Florida State, it was Penn State, and I don't know who the other one was. But there was another team there that was supposed to be that we had played that was real high. But you know, we pulled that game out, and as we were expected to do, man. You know, we rarely lost at all. So, you know, we handled that and sort of moved on to the next one, man.
Yeah, you won 16-10. That was defensive battle. Warren Sapp had 1.5 sacks. Yeah, just playing with that defensive line, yourself, Sapp. You had Darren Crine and Kevin Patrick. I mean, just talk about that defensive line at that time while you was there during that year, man. How great that defensive line was. Playing with a young Warren Sapp. Talk about that.
Well, you know, a young Warren Sapp, I mean, I remember when they first moved him into the defensive line room from a tight end. And there was a lot of talk about, oh, this guy's good, this guy's good. You're sitting in there, you're like, whatever. You know, I've been in there with Russell Maryland, Cortez Kennedy, you know, Greg Mark, a lot of great defensive linemen. And, you know, you watching film, and then, you know, on film, you see this guy running across the field, running after the ball. And you say, holy shit, this guy fast, you know? And then you start to realize, okay, well, this is what they're talking about, you know? But on that defensive line, we also had The Rock. You know, The Rock was there. Dan Fern was there. Kevin Patrick was there. I don't know if that's the year that Rusty got hurt.
Yeah, he did. I think it was against Arizona he got hurt.
Okay, because Rusty got hurt that year. Now Arizona, I got a safety in that game, and we barely won that game. I think that was we 8-7. I got to say, I was the one that got the safety in that game. And that was a barn burner for sure. But yeah, playing with Crime. Crime was a linebacker that got moved down. Warren Sapp was a tight end that got moved to defensive tackle. Kevin Patrick was an honorable mention All-American. I think he had like 9 sacks or 10 sacks. Kevin Patrick was a great player. And Sapp was just, you know, for a young pup, was unbelievable, you know. So.
Okay, so let's get into the national championship game. Unfortunately, you lost to Alabama. You're trying to go for the 5th national championship in a 10-year span. You lose 34-13. You had a 29-game winning streak. You hadn't lost in like 2-3 years. Talk about unfortunately losing that game to Alabama.
Well, I mean, going into that game, none of us ever thought we were going to lose. I mean, the thing was just about how much, you know, how bad we were going to beat them because they played man to man, and there was no way they were going to stop Lamar Thomas, Horace Copeland, Kettle, the receivers that we had. There was no way they were going to try to man up on us. We felt. George's hands.
Yeah, George Teague.
George Teague, when he did that, that was like, when stuff like that starts to happen in the game, and you start having turnovers, that's the only time we have a loss that I can remember is when we had like anywhere from 3 to 4 turnovers in the game. We just couldn't overcome it. And we lost that game. But before that game, my uncle, he was like, that's a great team you're playing. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you guys lose? And I just looked at him like he's crazy. I'm like, lose? What you talking about? But man, they got us that day. They had 2 great defensive linemen that both got drafted in the first round. I think one of them went to Tampa Bay. They just had a great defense that year. They got us for sure.
Okay, so the 90, yeah, before I get into the 93 season, yeah, Rusty Medeiros, yeah, he got hurt in the Arizona game. There was the fourth quarter, a block to his knee. That's what how he got hurt in that Arizona game. Okay, so 93, so that's your junior year, 93?
Yeah.
That's your junior year, okay. All right, 93, interesting season because you lost so many great players to the draft. You had Frank Costas as the quarterback. Talk about the game against Florida State because that was obviously a big game. You had their number, but unfortunately we lose that game to Charlie Ward and the Seminoles. Talk about losing that game, unfortunately, to them.
I remember that's the game we played in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Man, Florida State was coming in. They were riding high, and that game was a whirlwind, man. We couldn't stop Charlie Ward, man. Not Charlie Ward. Ward Dunn. I think it was Ward Dunn was the running back, right?
Sean Jackson too. He had a 69-yard touchdown. Sean Jackson.
Okay. I remember him. What did Ward Dunn have? Because I know he.
I don't have the stats in front of me with what he did, but your defense unfortunately gave up a 69-yard touchdown to Sean Jackson.
Okay.
That's what I see. I don't see anything for Ward Dunn. I lost 28-10.
What was the score?
28-10.
Yeah, we got blown out that game, man. They took it to us. We had lost a lot of people to the NFL draft, and some reason we just weren't there, man. And that was a hell of a feeling walking off that field knowing that we lost to them. There's one team you don't want to lose to is Florida State. And honestly, when you play that team, you almost have to throw all the records out. You can be ranked number 1 in the country, and they can be unranked. And they recruit players from across the state, so they always have talent. And that was one year that they got us. We definitely had to go back to the drawing board after that one.
Yeah, and the thing about this loss is that we came to this game with a 31 game regular season winning streak. You had not lost a regular season game in a long time. 31 games in a row. You had one in the regular season. You had a long streak, and this loss snapped that streak. So that was a tough loss. Other game I want to talk about, 93, West Virginia. That was a big game in November, going up to West Virginia and lose, unfortunately, 17-14. Ryan Collins was the quarterback in this game, but you lose, unfortunately, 17-14. Talk about that game. That was a big game for Miami, even though you lost to Florida State. You still had a slim chance to get into the national title race, but you lose to West Virginia. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was there, we played in 3 championship games, and I always tell people we had a chance for 4, and that was the season. If we had beat out West Virginia, we would have backdoored into the championship. But I think it was a night game. We played them up in West Virginia, and I remember it was snowing, it was sleet, and we came out to warm up before the game, and their crowd, it's a country crowd. They were throwing open cans of beer at us. I mean, it was crazy, man. It was nuts. I remember the first play of the game, I got a sack, and we were rolling, and we defensively we held tight all day. But in the end, we just couldn't put up enough points.
Okay.
And you're right. That was my senior year because the bowl game. I think we played. Did we play Arizona in the bowl game?
Yeah, Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, you lost. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
29-0.
Yeah, we got smoked. I mean, after what our thing was, man, is that it was championship or bust.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't playing in the championship. A lot of times we weren't even motivated to play. You know what I mean? And when we lost to West Virginia and we didn't have a chance to go to the national championship game, guys were like, whatever. But that hurt. After that game, I actually, knowing that was my last game, so I actually cried in the locker room. When we lost that game. Man, we had a lot of defensive assignments that just weren't. Guys weren't holding in their gaps, and guys were just shooting gaps, trying to make plays, um, and we lost. I think that was the first time in a while that we had lost. What did we lose that season? 3 games or 2 games? A total of 3? 2?
Three games.
Yeah, 3 games. That was the first time in many years that we had lost 3 games. You would think the world was coming to an end. I mean, when I was in college for 5 years, I think we only lost 6 games, and 3 of them were that year. So we didn't lose at all. The good thing I'm proud of is that we never lost a home game during my whole college career.
Yeah.
And we were the last class that Jimmy Johnson recruited. And once we left out of the system, that's when we started to lose at home. We lost a 55 game, win streak at home and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that was a tough year, a hell of a way to go out. But listen, I played in 3 championship games and could have played in 4 in 5 years. So can't complain.
Yeah, that winning streak that Miami had from 1985 to 1994. Yeah, it was a 58 game winning streak. 58 games.
58, yeah.
Okay, so 1994 rolls around. So the draft, did you get drafted in the NFL?
Well, after I tore my knee up, honestly, I wasn't the same type of player anymore. So I went in as a free agent to the Arizona Cardinals, and I got there, and I was second team behind Eric Swan, who was like an all-pro player, and I was doing great in practice. I was making a lot of plays. Buddy Ryan was the head coach. He had Jerome Brown for the Arizona Cardinals. They had also drafted what's the receiver? Our receiver from UM. Can't think of his name right now. The short receiver in Texas when he ran through the tunnel and started.
Yeah,
Randall Hill. Randall Hill. They drafted Randall Hill in the first round. So I was there with Randall, and I was doing real well. I was second team, and honestly getting ready to get paid. But during one of our practices, before one of our games, I ended up tearing my other knee up because we were practicing on turf back then. So I tore my other knee up, and basically I started rehabbing and stuff. Went back home and started rehabbing. And they wanted me to come back, but honestly, I had said that if I ever tore my other knee up, that I was gonna stop playing football because I didn't want to go out there and tear my knee up again on the same knee that's been repaired. Want to be able to walk as I got older. So.
Speaking of Randall Hill, the Dolphins drafted Randall Hill. He was traded to the Phoenix Cardinals.
On the day of the draft, or was it later on?
Well, according to the research, he was drafted in the first round by the Dolphins in '91 draft, 23rd overall. He was dealing with contract dispute and stuff like that. But they traded him to the Phoenix Cardinals for a first round pick in the 1992 NFL draft. So he didn't make it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's how he got there. Yeah, I forgot he got drafted by the Dolphins first. Yeah. I just know he was there when I was there. It was good to see a familiar face.
Yeah.
So when you have somebody there that you went to college with and you're playing at the level that we were playing at, you were expected to show up for your school, to produce. And I was definitely doing that in practice for sure, making plays.
Okay, so you had during your NFL career, it was a very short career. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't a long drawn out career, man, because my first year after I tore my knee up and I started rehab, and I just made the decision that since I tore my other knee up in college, I wasn't gonna risk being crippled or something like that. So I moved on. I graduated in 3 years with a degree from the School of Business in Miami. So I decided to go ahead and take that route. I mean, when Sapp came to Sapp from the very beginning, his whole thing was, to go pro and it was never really to focus on the academic side of stuff. When I went there, my mother had a PhD in pharmacy. So my whole thing was an opportunity to get the free private school education. So for me, I looked at it as I took football as far as it could go. Once I tore both my knees up, typically, back then they didn't have the surgeries the way they do now, where a lot of guys come back. I just decided to move on and begin my professional career.
Okay, so all right, let's move forward to the current Hurricanes of Miami. Your former teammate Mario Cristobal, right? You played with him while you was there, all right? Talk about your reaction when you became coach, and talk about a lot of big things happening, man. Like they had like a top 15 recruiting class. They made a lot of moves with their staff. Got a guy from Michigan, offensive coordinator Kevin Steele, from Auburn, and they got some guy from Georgia. And he's like one of the best recruiters or something like that. So talk about the current Hurricanes and what is your expectation of them getting back to where they was when you was there? Talk about that.
Well, there was a lady named Sylvia that used to check on all the ball players and stuff. And I remember after a bowl game, Sylvia, myself, and Mario went out to dinner. And he, asked her, to bring me along with him. And we would go to high schools in the South Florida area and talk to kids and stuff like that. Me, Mario, and Bob Trzynski, who was the head coach for the Cleveland Browns. So we all knew each other. So to see him get to where he is now, his coaching career is unbelievable. And what he did in Oregon was just amazing, But, when you look at the coaches that we've had over the years, you wonder whether or not, he'd be able to get it done, right? But I think we were ranked like in the 50s or 40s in terms of recruiting before he took over. And, to see that he finished in the top 15 was just with only a couple of weeks. It was just unbelievable. And then you start hearing about his work ethic and how he grinds and stuff like that. That's old school Hurricane, the way we used to get after it in practice, So Mario knows exactly what it takes. But it takes more than those things, You have to be a people person. You have to be able to respect people, talk to people properly, and be able to look out for the best of people. And Mario has shown that he can do that. And obviously, from all of his stops, he's learned a lot. Over the years, I look at some of our teams, and we've had great players. We've had great players who have underachieved in college, but then gone on to have great professional careers. So, and I think one guy in a meeting was asking Manny one time, like, over the past 8 years, you've had the #1 recruiting class in the Coastal Division in the ACC every year, and you've only won a division once. And the only team that's out-recruited Miami in the whole ACC over that span, I think, was Clemson and maybe Florida State. And so to see us lose 5 or 6 games a year with that kind of talent, it's just like, what in the heck is going on,
Yeah.
But Mario certainly knows what to do, and he certainly is making me a believer with the moves that he's making. And I'm thankful to the administration, first of all, for giving him the financial back. Because I think when you look at what they did with Randy Shannon, they gave him no backing. They gave him nothing. You know what I mean? He had no finances to be able to go get the real coaches that he wanted. And with each coach after that, they've given a little bit more up to Mark Richt. And even up to Manny, they gave him a lot. But what they've done for Mario is amazing. So honestly, I think it was an administrative thing getting behind the program, and them thinking like from any staff in there with talent in South Florida and that they can get it done. Well, it's beyond that now. You've got to be able to recruit. You've got to be able to develop. Development is the number one key. Because our guys, I've noticed over the years, would come in and they would they look great as freshmen, but then they would regress. Over the 3 years, they would get worse. And it was like, what's going on in there is making these guys regress and not push to get better. But I'm optimistic with what Mario is doing. I got a lot of faith in him, and he's hiring the right coaches in there to be able to get it done. And from what I'm hearing, the kids are really excited, and the coaches are impressed with how eager the kids are to learn and to want to be great.
Yeah, according to research, on the Hurricane program with the National Signing Day, they ranked 15th nationally with only 14 signings. They finished with the 15th ranking nationally, which is remarkable because they begun, according to research, National Signing Day as a 38th ranked class.
Right.
Now they're 15th, and so I mean that's amazing. He's a great recruiter, man. When he
Right.
did with Oregon, he definitely can do that with Miami. I mean,
He definitely done it. And to only have 14 kids and move up that high means that the quality of the kids that you're getting are very, very high. That's what that means. That means you're getting some ballers. Some people that have definitely have NFL talent. And some of the guys that he got for sure. And with his ties to the West Coast, if he can pull one or two kids out of there every year, that's going to